You gotta dance for the camera before you start.
That didn't happen.
Baby shark.
You what?
I said baby shark.
Oh, God. Alright, well, thank you everybody for coming. I'm Doug Jones, in case none of you know me.
Hi, Doug.
Sorry, I don't really have a great place to stand here.
It'll face track if you want.
Okay. Alright, so my presentation for tonight, I'm going to do it on unRaid, and I'll cover a few advanced areas of unRaid, dealing around media playing and streaming. So just to give a little bit of a background on what got me into unRaid, I have always been a data hoarder. I've never deleted anything from my machines up until somewhat recently. I would just try to always keep track and version control some of my documents and things like that. Just refuse to delete. First got started into the whole process of keeping the data when I was using just a Windows desktop, add an extra drive to it, and once the drive would fill up, add a second drive. Once I ran out of bays within my desktop, I invested in these little 4-bay eSATA devices called MediaSonics, and so it was just one port replication and varying size in disks. That's the important part. To get a parity back pool of disks to create various network shares. And with that, unRaid can be used to run applications and VMs on top of the Slackware instance that unRaid runs on top of. And the three key components for unRaid is you'll have network attack storage, application server, and it can also run as a virtualization host. Now, while this is actually built on Slackware, which is free and open source, unRaid is actually a paid product. The Pro license is currently $130, and that will allow you to use unlimited data disks and 2 parodies, and I believe unlimited cache disks. So I'm going to kind of split this up and talk about the 3 key components of unRaid. The first one is the NAS portion of it. You can boot this on nearly any x86 64-bit capable system and manage an array of disks that vary in size, speed, brand, and various protocols. You can manage the array of disks. They can vary in size. And this is important because it allows you to actually replace your disks without having to rebuild your entire array. The only requirement that you need between your data and your parity disks is that your parity disk or disks has to be equivalent size or larger than any one of your data disks. So for instance, if I'm running nothing but straight 4 terabyte disks, and I want to add an 8 terabyte disk, the first one I'll have to add has to be the parity. And how this varies compared to traditional RAID versus the unRaid software. Traditional RAID, I'm sure most of you are aware, is a RAID array data striped across multiple disks. Definitely has a performance benefit over unRaid, as you'll have multi-reads and writes from each device, depending upon your controller. RAID is RAID 5 is actually parity back on a single disk, so you can actually lose a single disk and still be fine. RAID 6 allows you to lose 2. unRaid actually functions kind of the similar way where you can set up a single parity disk for dual parities. RAID is susceptible to catastrophic failure if you lose n+1, where n is your fault tolerance number of disks. If you lose your N+1, you actually lose your entire array and possibly cannot get the data back. And disks within a traditional RAID are required to be the same size, generally. They're required to be the same size, or it'll actually limit it down to the smallest disk in the array. How unRaid differs with that, it's a network share that can span multiple disks, and you can configure it to use up to 2 parities, similar to a RAID 6 environment. Write access will actually only spin up the single disk that it's writing to at a time, and then the parity is calculated to that and then drops on the parity disk. It's a lot easier to recover in the event of a disaster, because each disk can actually be pulled out and mounted on any Linux operating system. And you can actually encrypt the disks, and they're all encrypted separately, so you can actually pop an encrypted disk out and still decrypt it on a separate computer. You do have a slight performance hit compared to traditional RAID, because you're limiting yourself to single disk speeds. But you can actually mitigate that performance loss by introducing a cache drive or a cache pool. So you can actually have a single SSD NVMe or multiple that are striped together. So the first aspect of unRaid to talk about is the application server side of it. And any Linux or Windows-based application can be run on top of unRaid using the 2 main methods, which is either a Docker container or a plugin. The Docker containers will run in their own isolated environments, and the unRaid Docker apps are actually community maintained. It's quite a large list, and it's always growing and being updated. And any Docker container that is not within the community applications pool, you can actually just go out to Docker Hub and grab it. You just usually have to configure things like the ports and the variables. And so the plugins or the plugin apps will actually run directly on top of the Slackware instance. They're not isolated, but you get full access to the server with those. So you can install actual Slackware packages on top of it as well. So even if you're not using a community maintained application, you can just pull down the .plg file or the TGZ and install it directly on top of Slackware. And plugins and the Docker containers can be managed via the unRaid web interface or via their command line. So for Docker, the Docker is just containerized applications that run in an isolated environment on top of the operating system. The Docker containers on unRaid use a community applications plugin that allows built-in search functionality to actually go out and search all of the maintained applications and plugins. Pretty much all Docker containers that I've tried to utilize on top of unRaid, I've been able to successfully run, given, there's probably been 1 or 2 that didn't work right, but I would have probably struggled with those just given the wrong rel. And the Docker applications can be managed via unRaid and configured for updates and back up your application data, and even automatically perform any updates on top of it. Okay, so the plugins is actually, it's a new addition to unRaid as of version 6. It used to be a community projects were actually developed to just basically, they would provide you within a forum a TGZ file, or sorry, a TXZ file. So it's a Slackware base file that you could go out and install directly on top of unRaid. And then once they started to become more popular in the later versions of version 5, unRaid actually started utilizing that to update the actual OS itself. And any Slackware, ELG, or TXEs can be installed on the unRaid OS. You just have to make sure that it is a supported version of that binary that is compatible with the version of Slackware. The virtualization host, this is one of the very few features that I actually do not utilize on top of here. Should have spun up a guest just to show you guys, but we can cover that in the live demo. But so the virtualization host it's actually a libvirt KVM host. You can install any Windows, Linux. There's actually a YouTuber that's very popular in the unRaid community that does a lot of how-to guides. He just recently released one showing you how to, with 3 different newer versions of Mac OS X, how to actually run it virtualized on top of here. Which I will have a link to his YouTube channel at the end of the presentation, and I'll provide it right with the deck if you want. All right, and VMs can be assigned to a wider array of resources than the Docker containers, but they still offer the isolated access. It used to be pre-version 6.7, which the latest unRaid OS is on 6.7. There's a release candidate for 6.8 currently. I am actually trailing behind on a 6.6 version, which I'll cover later. But on the version that I'm running, you can't do anything like CPU pinning within Docker. So I can't explicitly limit a Docker container to specific cores like you can with this. Yes?
For the virtualization piece, can you do nested virtualization? Meaning, are you able if you change on Slackware's OS to allow the KVM nested option kernel module to be enabled, will it allow nested virtualization?
I have never tried that. I have stood up a Windows guest and a Linux guest one year before, but I've never tried to stand up nested for. Have you? But BJ's the only one I know, so I'm just picking him. Have you done any virtualization on top of it? Okay. All right. I'll let you know. I'll get back to you on that one. I don't see why it wouldn't work, as long as your CPU supports that. Is it the edX flag or whatever the ATX flag?
Well, yeah, but I was just wondering more. So Slackware with unRaid on top of it, how it would work if you messed with the kernel modules and enabled things, just because you were tuning it by hand.
I would venture to say that it should work without any modifications, because this community is very strong and the virtualization piece has been in here for a number of years. But I'll confirm that and get back to you.
Okay.
It would appear that you can.
Do what?
It would appear that you can.
Okay.
Thanks, Google.
Okay, so the hardware that I'm going to be demoing here, this, like I said, this can be done on commodity hardware. This is slightly enterprise, small business grade hardware, so you can actually do this a lot cheaper than I'm doing. I'm just showing a breakdown of the costs that I have involved in this particular server. So I have an unRaid Pro Key, which is currently $129 from LimeTech, which is the parent company that actually makes unRaid.
And is that a perpetual license, or do you
Yes.
have to pay every time you want to upgrade?
No. I actually acquired 2 keys for $150 7 years ago. Roy and I split the cost, so he actually ran one and I was just fine.
You can use 6 drives for $60 and 12 drives for $90 if you just want
Yes, yeah, I was going to break down that. Thank you for that. Yeah, so they actually have a free tier, which I believe is good. It's for either 7 or 30 days. They just kind of recently changed it. 30. Thank you. It used to be 7 days. They give you unlimited, and then I think there was a lot of complaints and backlash from that, so they switched over to 30 days. So this is actually the second iteration of my unRaid server. I just recently rebuilt this about 2 months ago. The old one, I had a hell of a lot more money thrown into the server itself. But so I was able to actually acquire this server on eBay for $464.27 shipped. And what that included was this 24-bay case, hot swap large form factor, 24 3.5-inch drives. And it actually came with a SAS2 card in IT mode, which is kind of important because you want the operating system to be able to see each individual disk. Is it going to let you adjust it there? Okay. I wish I could tilt it. I don't want to do it with the drives running, but you guys are welcome to come up if you want to.
It's a beast.
I mean, it's a small group. So
No, it's huge. It's a huge group.
huge group.
Huge. Don't look
That's only
behind.
because I make up 5 people.
But so with this server, it actually was the case. All the original fans, the SAS card, and dual power supplies, and a rack mount kit, 465 shipped. And it actually came with all the hard disk trays. The motherboard I have listed there, the Supermicro model number does not really mean much to me. But it is a dual gigabit with a dedicated IPMI port, so I can actually manage it. I have a video card in here, but that is not used for actual video. That's for the transcoding. And it actually is total of 24 cores, 2.8 gigahertz. All of that was included, and 16 gigs of memory. The only upgrades I have done to this was I added an additional 32 gigs of memory, which if you're using this for just straight network attached storage, you can get by with 8 gigs. No problem. But being that I'm running Docker applications on top of this and things like Plex, I wanted some extra memory. So I have a total of 48 gigs in here. I did upgrade the fans because this sets 5 feet from my desk in my office. So if you guys noticed, it was relatively quiet. That's because I swapped out every single fan in here and even upgraded the power supply to a much quieter version. Supermicro provides this SQ power supply model number.
Super quiet.
I believe that's what it stands for. And I was actually surprised at how much quieter this was after I swapped everything out. And probably the biggest expense when building one of these is going to be in your hard drive. So I currently have, let's see, I know I had documented that I have a 32 gig thumb drive on there, but I saw in the UI that apparently I swapped it out for the 128 gig one. So, but that's a moot point. So the thumb drive, that is where your config and everything lies. Whenever you boot up the server, it runs everything in memory, copies your config over to a live run, and that's it. So you're not actually running from your thumb drive, so you're not going to trash it.
So why such a big thumb drive?
I think the other one had died, and I probably just swapped it out with what I had sitting around. And your license for unRaid is actually tied to the UUID of your thumb drive. So if you want a new license, they do have an online utility now. Used to be you would have to email the one guy with your new UUID. He'd send you a new license key. You just drop it on the thumb drive. Currently, I have a 1 terabyte Samsung Evo SSD in here, and I actually have a hot swap 2.5-inch PCI bay on the back because I didn't want to occupy one of the large form factor slots to just house a tiny SSD. So these are actually a pretty cool device. Allows you to, so I don't have to unrack it, I can just reach behind and flip the disk out. And currently I have 10 8 terabyte unRaid drives and 6 terabyte drives in there. I recently pulled out, what is that, 8 4 terabyte drives. So I'm actually, from my old server, I was able to reduce those out. The plan is to eventually add some 10 terabytes or 12s or 16. But being that I have a little bit of breathing room with a large amount of space, I can just add those when I need them, which is the beauty of this operating system. All right, so I won't really talk in detail about the plugins, but I actually I utilize quite a few different plugins and Docker applications. So the main plugins that I can recommend are the community applications, and all of the ones with the preface of CA. Those are all CA community applications maintained ones. So there's a community maintained application list that is searchable, and community applications will actually hit on various plugins and Docker containers. So it's one of the most important ones. Nerd Tools allows you to install binaries directly on top of Slackware for things like screen or IOTop, DevTop, things like that. Any kind of performance tools, all the binaries are in there. Just saves you from having to go out searching and find them and install them manually. Pre-clear disks used to be a very important one. Since it's unRaid 6.7 or 6.8, one of them is dropping the need for you to pre-clear a disk. So when you pre-clear a disk, basically what that's doing is it reads from every bit on the disk, writes to every bit on the disk, and then rereads from it. And that's just a standard way that the unRaid developers wanted you to check the disk before you brought it into production. And I think the last time I pre-cleared a disk, an 8 terabyte took 70 something hours, somewhere around there. It takes a little bit of time. And it used to be that a disk had to be pre-cleared before it could be added into your array. So if you slapped a brand new drive in here, fired up your array, told it to format, you would have to sit there and wait for it to go. So it took forever. And then unbalance is a very important one because that allows you, it's basically a web application that will allow you to shift the data around your drives. So I can select disk 12, I want to be empty, and tell it to plan out an execution, and it will tell you, okay, I'm going to move this folder to here, this folder to another disk. You click a button, wait about 2 days, and it will completely empty off the drive for you. So it's useful if you want to yank a disk or reduce your array size down. And then the most important one for tonight is the unRaid NVIDIA plugin. That actually uses a modified version of the unRaid OS. It has different kernel modules and pre-built NVIDIA drivers to allow you to use things, the functionality within the NVIDIA cards, which I'll cover in a minute. And the Docker containers I use are Deluge VPN, which is a torrent client that automatically connects through private internet access's VPN service. Ombi, which is the new name for Plex requests, so anybody can sign in and say, hey, I'd like to watch this movie. Plex, which is the media server. Tautuli is a Docker container that talks to my Plex container, and it pulls statistics about what people are watching, what they're not watching. Basically, it just gives me a usage model so I can see if I need to upgrade the performance or if I can like detune my server a little bit. I can get by with that. I utilize Unify, so it's for the Ubiquity controller. A lot of people have the physical cloud keys, but so we'll just throw in a cheap Docker container. And then UNMS, it's another Ubiquity service. So I actually have some Airstream Unify devices, basically Beam network stuff. It's not managed through Unify, it's actually just managed through the UNMS. And then Bazaar is a subtitle downloader. Alright, so the Plex with NVIDIA enhancements. So Plex is a popular media server. I know quite a few of you use that. And with the NVIDIA enhancements I'm going to talk about, it's actually utilizing the NVIDIA hardware transcoding. And what that utilizes is the NV encoding GPU within the GPU. And I will show you support matrix for that. So this is what NVIDIA said when you're handling transcoding through a hardware device, for the hardware transcoding, it's actually utilizing NVENC on an NVIDIA card if you're utilizing all this firmware, or sorry, all this software. And as long as you're running the GTX 1050 or higher, you can actually transcode at max 2 streams at a time. So that will free up the CPUs on the motherboard. And the card that I'm actually using is a Quadro P2000, and it's the lowest model you can get that actually is completely unrestricted on that. So I can keep throwing streams at it until it runs out of memory and out of GPU power. There is there's an NVIDIA patch for it that allows you to, this is a community plugin, which will automatically unlock those NVENC streams on any card lower than a Quadro. So basically it tricks your machine into doing it. Obviously NVIDIA doesn't like this because they want you to spend more on the expensive cards. I wish I'd have known about this before I bought the expensive card. But a lot of the folks in the community, within the unRaid community, will actually discuss this, but nobody links to it. I'll include it in here. Okay, I'll show you guys a slide. There you go.
How much power does that thing suck?
Right now I only have a single 900 watt power supply in there, and I believe at idle it uses about 250 watts. Not nearly as high as I was expecting given everything that's in there. Now it's very rare that I'll actually have all 24, 25 disks spun up at the same time. So I've never gotten quite a great measurement out of it. Out of my old server, I know if I was running full bore, it would pull about 650 watts. But I've never tested it in this new server yet. Okay, so this is the, switch back to the light theme to make it a little bit easier to read. So this is the unRaid OS. This is the web UI for unRaid. The web UI for this has been slightly modified or definitely tweaked by me based on the usage that I have. And been utilizing this and plugins and all the different settings that I have basically carried over the last 5 to 6 years that I've been using this. So I can actually spin up a new config and we can see we can see what it would look like out of the box here in just a minute, but I just want to show all the cool functionality here. So for when you first log in, you're granted with the dashboard, and this will give you a summary of your apps and any of your virtual machines that are running. You'll actually see them listed here. So I'm happy because it can't talk to my UPS because I'm actually using the APC UPSV plugin to talk to my UPS, so it can actually monitor, how much battery life is left on that. And it's actually the server that all of my other boxes on my network will communicate with to know the battery life, so they can start to cleanly shut themselves down if it's running on battery and before it completely runs out. And here you'll just get a high-level overview of the disks that you have in here and just a pairing status. See all your different shares and things like that. On your main screen is the majority where you'll spend your time when you're modifying disks. We're going to go ahead and stop the array. So when your array is stopped, this is where you can configure your parity devices and how you want your disks laid out within here. I currently have a gap here. That's because this is where the 4 terabyte drives were moved to, and I just haven't reordered it because I'll need to rebuild my parity. But you can specify how many slots of disks. Currently, some reason mine's only limited to 30 instead of the unlimited. But I don't know if their idea of unlimited is 30, but at most I can read on here is the 24 and then the 1 cache disk. But here's where you can specify. I don't need to select that. So if you want to have more disks in your cache pool, or create a cache pool, rather, you can assign an additional disk here. And then you'll have extra options for how you want to sort them. But just to show you how easy it is to add a new drive. So I just slapped in a 4 terabyte disk. Wait for the server to detect it. Because this disk is not pre-cleared, it'll actually warn you when you're starting the drive or starting the array that it will be clearing it. So once it came up, here's our new disk that we just added, the 4 terabyte disk, and it's currently being being cleared, which it estimates will take about 10 hours. And then once it's done, it will automatically add that storage space into the array and become immediately available, no intervention.
And you're just using the regular SATA disks too, as
Yes.
disks.
Yeah, you can use fast drives if you want. A lot of the ones that I'm actually utilizing, so I started doing this when 2 terabyte drives were the biggest that you could get. And at the time, I was actually running green drives in this thing for the longest time, which apparently is not a good idea, but the Western Digital green drives I actually had pretty good luck with. But now every single disk that I use is a Western Digital red drive, or what's called a white label red drive. So as long as you're buying a Western Digital external easy store drive that is 8 terabytes or above, they are actually Western Digital red drives, which is their enterprise level storage drives. And even though it'll just be a straight white label, it's actually considered a red drive because it has reds and internals. And that's the cheapest way that you can currently buy drives. They'll still have a warranty on them as long as you have the enclosure. You just slap it back in the enclosure, ship it off, you can get a replacement. But if you can catch them on sale, you can get the 8 terabytes for $130. I've seen the 10 terabytes for as low as $160-ish, but that was few and far between. Or you could just go out and buy a straight red drive, and it will run you about $260. So you're paying double for a drive that you don't have to shuck. And it's a 5-minute YouTube video, you can just shuck the drives right out. Screw them in, slap it in, you're good to go.
What do you do with all your cases?
I keep one. The rest of them I've thrown away.
Just to note, if you shuck the drive, you'd be able to tape a pin.
Yes, that's a great point. So the newer drives actually have the 3.3 volts pin actually wired up. I don't know if that's, I don't know the reason behind that, if it was like a low power mode over USB, or do you know the origin of that
I
one?
don't know what. I assumed it was to keep you from shucking them.
Yeah, it possibly could be. So they're on the power connector on the back. On the back of the drive, there's the multiple pins. One of them is a 3.3 volt, and I don't know which one it is offhand because I've only had to do it to 2 of my drives. But basically, when you shuck it, if it detects that, then the drive won't spin up. So the quick and dirty way is to put tape over that one pin, or you break the pin off, or buy the Kapton tape, and it just basically severs the connection, and the drive spin up just fine. When I got it pretty early on for the first time, and it confused the hell out of me for at least a couple of days. I'm like, why is this drive not spinning up? Works fine in the enclosure. And then come to find out about that 3.3 volt pin. I actually went cheap and dirty and used Scotch tape on mine about 3 years ago. It's still working. Not had any random drive disconnects. But yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for that. So the main screen is where you'll be configuring your array. And then the shares are where you'll actually set up which type of share that you want. For instance, just go to the media one. And here's where you can set up the allocation method. And that's just how you want to break up your data before rolling to the next one. I use high water, so basically it will write to one disk, and once the disk gets to whatever threshold I have set, which this should have a value in it. So right now this one will actually burn 100% of the drive before it rolls to the next one. Usually I give myself 50 or 100 gigs free. Once it hits that threshold, then it will start writing to the next disk. And the split level is basically how you want it divided up. So if you do, say, 2 levels deep, that will allow anything that is 2 subdirectories lower than the share to be split up. So it will try to group the data together as much as possible based off of the split level that you have configured. And within your share, you can actually specify which disks that you want on here. And by the way, each individual disk could be encrypted. I have had all of mine encrypted and then recently pulled it off because I was having server issues. It takes a while to get everything shifted off, converted, and then shifted back, and it takes even longer to undo that. But it turns out that wasn't my issue all along, so it was a 4-week endeavor that resulted in no difference, and I ended up having a power supply issue and not a software issue like I thought. So eventually I'll re-encrypt all my disks. And here's where you can specify your, sorry, I skipped down too far. So this will allow you to set up whether or not you want that particular share to utilize the cache disk or not. The average write speed on a Western Digital Red drive is approximately 125 to 130 megabytes a second. I have seen a spike size like 150, but utilizing just a cheap Samsung Evo SSD as a cache drive, its write speeds are 550 megabytes a second. So you can write up to 1 terabyte. In my instance, I have a 1 terabyte cache disk. So it will write 1 terabyte there, and then there is a program, a binary called mover that is within unRaid that will tell it to shift it to the array. You can specify how often you want that to run. And you have the options to only, for a particular share, to only be on a cache disk, never use the cache disk, or just to configure it as on. So basically, if I say that I'm going to write to my media share, it gets dumped to the cache drive first. And each particular share, you can actually set up different export rules and security groups for the NFS share, as well as Samba. And you can specify your Samba users that you can use.
Is that the only way to network share?
You can do it from the command line as well.
Oh, well, okay, but those are your options.
Oh, you taking you're referring to the Apple?
iSCSI.
iSCSI? There's probably a plugin for that.
Sorry. I'm thinking about synology. ISCSI.
Yeah, it's spelled. You get back to you on that one.
So right one, guys.
What's that? I'm sorry, Chris?
I'm not the developer in here that's going to get flogged after the presentation. Yeah, I'm looking at you, kid.
No comment.
Oh shit! Now I want to buy one of these.
I'm not rating an app, by the way.
That's not that, it's a plugin.
Plugin, sorry.
Okay, so
I saw an app up there.
after your shares, you can actually just do straight up disk shares, but that is because I have a plugin installed called unassigned disks. So basically, it allows you to utilize individual disks that aren't in the array.
I'll share those.
Yeah, because I used to actually, so I usually have 2 SSDs in here, one for cache and one for my Docker application data. And if I'm going to be running it as a virtualization host, all the libvirt ISOs and everything would actually be on that second disk.
Another question for you. How long have you had that SSD in there?
This particular one, probably less than 6 months.
Well, the reason I'm
It is
asking-
my 4th one.
Okay, it's how often do you burn through them as a cache disk is going to be?
Quite often.
Yeah.
That's why I don't buy the expensive ones anymore.
Okay.
To go back to iSCSI, there is a video from the YouTuber 2 years ago, how to set up iSCSI targets on unRaid using a VM.
Using a VM.
Okay.
Using Open Filer VM.
Open
It was
file.
2 years
Okay.
ago, so it might be updated at this point, but there is an
Okay.
option.
You know who the Googler is in the class.
There's a test after this. Close
There's a
book.
test. Try it. Justin's not here, so somebody's going to do it.
But
I totally remember that video.
here's where you can set up your user accounts. They're not really used for anything other than permissions for your shares.
Like stupid Lois.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's my wife's go-to alias online. So. And these are actually matched up for our Windows usernames. Hey,
Who do you work for?
game. You can't game on Linux very well.
I agree with that. It just doesn't happen.
Does it bother you that I'm presenting from a Windows box?
I was trying not to say that, but you mentioned Windows way too many times here today, son.
You leave them because of that?
Yes, I am. Susan's been downstairs for about half an hour and picked me up.
Oh, okay.
I figured I better go before she gets pissed off. I'm supposed to be in Philippines at AV College at 6:45.
You're going
Have
to
fun.
close.
Okay, and within the settings, I'm actually using a different tool for the CPU pinning. My Docker image is actually corrupted since a little bit ago, but that is because of one of the tweaks that I'm running. It kind of causes issues with it. So I'll show you. I'll rebuild it here in just a second. And basically, here's where you can just configure all your settings for each individual component. So, show you. I have to stop the array to rebuild my Docker. I'll bring back the disk that we added for the test. Okay. So now that the array has started again, the Docker tab will actually, here you can see all of the different Docker apps that I have configured for this server. Right now I only have the Plex one running just because I would have to re-IP everything, which I can quickly do if you guys want to see any of these particular apps. But the majority, or sorry, the major one I wanted you to see was the Plex container. And this is just installed using the built-in community apps search. And I'm just using the Plex one here, just configured. And like any other Docker container, you can just specify which versions you want to use. The variables here. So the variables that are utilized within this container are the version, the transcode directory, which I currently have pointed to /temp. And what that will do is it actually utilizes the memory within the server for the transcoding directory. So when it's having to do any quick conversions, I want it to utilize the fastest way it can. And the NVIDIA visible devices, this is actually the UUID of the Quadro card that I have in here. So it'll actually give it full access to that Quadro card once this container is started.
Is it like exclusive access, basically?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't use the card for anything other than hardware transcoding within Plex. You can use it within Kodi or MB, and I forget what the other fourth major player is, but they all have pretty similar functionality. for utilizing.
I just wasn't sure if it was almost like you were giving it exclusive access.
Yes,
for
yeah, you.
almost like a hardware terminal.
I don't believe that you can share it between containers. I'm pretty sure it is just exclusive access to this one.
Yeah.
So here is actually the Flex instance running. And once you have that configured in the transcoder, you basically just have to enable the use hardware acceleration when available, and it will start to utilize the NVIDIA card. And when you're running the modified version of unRaid that has all of the pre-compiled NVIDIA drivers, you get the binaries. So NVIDIA SMI will actually monitor the card. You'll know how much GPU is being utilized, the memory, the power consumption, and what PIDs and the process names are that are running it. So for instance, right now we have no processes found. I don't know what the upload speed is here, so
I'm gonna go with somewhere between terrible and
Here?
garbage.
yeah.
I think we got.
So I'm
I think it was
gonna-
100 up, 100 down.
Is it setting it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that.
So right now I'm limiting a stream to my phone. And you can see the process picked up. It's currently using 254 megabytes. The PID listed there, and it's using 23 watts of the drive, or sorry, of the actual card. But these are, this particular Quadro is actually a 5 gig card. So streaming something that's 1080p, downplaying it to, what I think here, 720. It's actually doing all of the conversions on the fly as it comes to my phone, and it's all being handled server side. And it's using very little hardware of that actual card. If I was not utilizing this, the Quadro card, and instead relying on the built-in CPUs to actually do the transcoding, it works, but once you get about 3 streams going of something that's pretty high quality, it will put a hurt on the CPUs.
I had some real headaches with CPU
Yes.
transcoding with Blu-rays, straight up Blu-ray rips.
Yes.
It's really rough.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. If you're streaming something utilizing Plex, there are 2 main methods that a video will play. It's either transcoding, which means it's being converted on the fly, or direct play, which means bit for bit it's going to the client, and then the client is doing the interpretation of it. At my house, I utilize an NVIDIA Shield device that's connected to my big screen. I have probably went through 15 to 20 different home theater PC solutions, things like that over the years, and some of them can get quite expensive. This is one of the cheaper options. You can utilize things like Roku's, things like that. That will definitely transcode because it's a smaller device meant for CPU, to limit the CPU a little bit. The NVIDIA Shield is the one device that I love because it will direct play anything that I throw at it. So 60, 80 gig, 80 gig UHD Blu-ray rips with Dolby Atmos, 7.1 and HDR, it will play it just fine. And my server, all it sees is bits going out. It's not utilizing any of the CPU or the GPU to handle that.
I just found a use for my old Shield.
They just brought a new one out yesterday too.
I've got an old one. It works just fine.
Which one do you have?
The K1. Is that?
Oh, do you have the
I have the tablet.
You have the tablet. Oh, okay. I'm talking about the
Yeah,
Shield
yeah, yeah.
TV. I've always wanted to see what it is. You have to bring
I'll
it
bring it
next
up.
time.
Yeah.
But it's still working, okay?
Yeah. It's starting to slow down. It's It's about 4 years old.
They're very nice. I've never seen one in person, but I've watched a lot of
Yeah.
videos. But so this is the one thing that I wanted to share the most today was the culmination of all of these different components coming together for this one single purpose of streaming media. And this normally, like BJ and I were talking before the meeting here, that normally you don't really need to transcode if you're doing it within your house, unless you have a lot of different streams going to devices that cannot direct play. The transcoding that I have to do is basically if I'm going to be watching it anywhere in my house using a Chromecast, it's going to transcode to that. Or I actually have my Plex server shared out with my brother and my parents.
I was going to ask how often you hit more than 2 streams if you're sharing it out.
Yes, yeah. Might be frowned upon, I don't know. But yeah, honestly, the limiting factor in my environment is my upload speed, which is about 50 megabits a second, which is good for home upload speeds, don't get me wrong. But it's a limiting factor now. It used to be that my server couldn't keep up with the number of people streaming at once, but I've actually had, as a test, it was either 6 or 7 50 gig Blu-rays transcoding at once, and that Quadro card kept up.
Those things are tanks, dude.
Yeah, at first I didn't think it was worth the money. It's a video card that I'm not going to be playing games with, but it's a beast. I'd be interested to see if somebody would try it with a 10 series using the NVIDIA patch. I don't have one, although I do have a new 20 series card. I've never finished it. But
Still rocking my 6 series.
But yeah, sorry.
I'm going to switch back to work.
Yeah, I believe it. That's why I don't have kids yet.
So, you guys have any questions or something you want me to cover in particular on
So
this?
when do we get access to the Plex?
Yeah, what's the Mr. Last subscription rates?
I
Like
I
$10
don't-
a month?
I don't sell anything. That's when you get out of that gray area and it's wrong.
I'll pay cash. I don't care.
Let's begin with the camera level.
You're recorded there. Is it off?
We can stop at any time.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for everybody.